Well, hello everyone and welcome to Season 4, Round 12 of my F1 2012 Career Mode. I am Spuds and today we're at Spa-Francorchamps in Belgium on this classic circuit. Been modified a few times over the years, but still got the old elements such as Eau Rouge, classic bits of a classic track. And I'm waffling already, that didn't take long. 39 seconds, new record. But anyway, this is my qualifying lap. I need to qualify second or above, and the car feels absolutely fantastic today. I used the same setup as last year, apart from the gearing I changed, and it's a lot better in the old acceleration department, which is always good. 30 seconds is my first sector time. Let's make my way down the hill now. Got nothing to compare it to yet, as I'm the first one out on track. I actually did go out again for another lap after this one, just to set a faster time. Well, obviously that's what you're doing qualifying. That's kind of a silly thing to say, isn't it? But yeah, I failed miserably on that one. I actually cut a corner on that second one, so which is a shame because it would have been faster. Not doing too bad. I have made a few mistakes on this lap, which will have cost me a few tenths. So I wasn't quite expecting to get pole or anything, so I was kind of hoping for maybe second, third, because the car is fast, it's feeling good, and I haven't really had any control issues with it either, so that's pretty good considering my driving style most of the time. Let's go out to La Chicane now. Just get a good line out of here. Can make all the difference, especially when the AI are pretty slow on that last chicane in terms of braking. But there you go, it's a 1:47.6, just enough for pole position. So I was quite happy with that. 10th faster than Grosjean in Rosberg, Fernando Alonso, Raikkonen, Schumacher, Vettel, Alonso, Maldonado, and the other two who I just didn't see the names of. Jenson qualified 11th. So here we are for the start of the race, with an ominous looking sky, but it doesn't rain today, which is good. I haven't had to deal with any wet weather races just yet, and going into the next race in Italy, it doesn't look like I will either. Will there either. So yeah, it's looking good. Good weather this season, as it is in Britain at the moment. Currently in the middle of a bloody heat wave, I think. We've had like 2 weeks of continuous bloody sunshine, which is all well and good, but it's a bit too hot for me, I must admit. When the temperature gets up to about 30, that's a bit much for me, which is irritating. But here we go, we got a 1.4 second gap to Grosjean already, and just be aware, there's pretty much no overtaking in this race. Oh, the car is bloody fast, it really is. And, you know, making up for the time I lost in Hungary, the way I just fell back from Schumacher and Raikkonen. I think they were the ones who won the last race on the podium. But yeah, seeing as nothing as much is going to happen in this race, I am going to talk about the F1 2013 game, considering there's probably not any Formula 1 news in general anyway. So I was at work last night and I just put a few notes down on what we know about the upcoming games so far. It was only announced yesterday, but I do have an A4 sheet of information that I have picked out of the internet from various sources. From Steve Hood's Twitter account, from questions he's been answering, from Codemasters themselves on their announcement, and a GameSpot video which actually contained gameplay of all three eras of cars. Basically, it had an 80s car, a 90s car, and a 2013 car. So, mentioning that, you know, 80s and 90s cars. As far as most of you will know, there is classic content in 2013. There are two editions of the game. The standard edition is the 2013 game as usual, and it also includes 80s classic content, including 2 extra tracks, Brands Hatch and Jerez. And in the 80s classics, you get as standard 10 drivers, including Mansell, Andretti, Fittipaldi and Berger. There are 5 cars to be announced at a later stage, but we have seen one, which is the Lotus. I think it was a T100 or something like that, because that was also in the GameSpot demo. There will be cars from Williams and Ferrari in that one as well. So he gets to have a look at 10 drivers as well. You should get a nice little race going on there. But that's what's in the standard edition. The normal edition, the one that everyone will probably be buying anyway. The classic edition, which I assume is a limited edition, pretty much. You basically get everything I mentioned before, plus the 90s classic content, which includes 7 drivers, including Coulthard, Irvine, Prost and Villeneuve. More to be announced later. 6 cars in that category from Ferrari and Williams, also to be announced. And the bonus tracks with that, you will get Imola in San Marino and Estoril from Portugal. So some good little additions there. Basically, if you get the standard edition, you can download the 90s as DLC content. Downloadable content, that's what it stands for, yep, of course. You can get it as a separate download anyway on the on download stores, PlayStation Store, Steam, Xbox Live Marketplace, whatever you want to call it. So yeah, pretty much quite interesting. It's good to see some gameplay of it as well. If you have a look at, if you search Google for F1 2013 GameSpot, all one word, they have a 18-minute video which shows a guy driving a Lotus from the 80s, a Williams from the 90s, and one of the modern cars, I think it was Red Bull, and talking with one of the developers about the game as well. So that's a pretty interesting video. Also got some extra videos which I have seen on Alex Zaffaro's channel. A few of you will know him. If you don't, search for him on Google. He's quite well known. Yeah, some nice little footage come out there. Interesting in the classic content. There in the 80s there was like colour filters on the screen, like it was like it had a yellowish hue to it in the 80s one when he was driving the Lotus. It's sort of to replicate sort of the TV style of the time, especially with the heads-up display and all that, and the fonts used, which is quite interesting. But I don't really think the colour filters are particularly necessary. I do want the realistic colours rather than what it would have looked like on TV, for example. But anyway, but that is more than made up with Murray Walker introducing the classic content on the game, which is pretty cool. It's good to hear his voice again in a video game. So what else do we know so far? There will be no demo, which is a little bit disappointing, because I wanted to try and see if my PlayStation 3 controller worked with the PC version, but I'm just going to have to dive straight into it. Should be alright, I don't know, but we'll see. But they wanted to concentrate more on the game, and it does take time out of developers' schedule as well to make a demo, so yeah, as long as they concentrate on the game and don't put as many bugs in this time, that's absolutely fine by me. So the graphics, looking at those, they are improved slightly. They're not going to blow you away, especially from last year's game. You know, with yearly titles, there's always a steady evolution of graphics. The only jump we will probably see in graphics will probably come next year with 2014. I would assume so, with the next generation consoles coming out. Very possibly. Another little co-op makes a return, probably in the same format as 2012, so that's been confirmed. My dreams have been shattered by having no podium celebrations in the game, and there's been no mention of including that in the future. There's no formation laps either in 2013, but they have been. They want to add it in a future date, maybe to the next game as well, or another game down the line. But formation laps is definitely something they want to do. There is no practice 1 and practice 2. You've only got the same format as this year. We've just got practice 3 and then qualifying and then the race. They do want to add the other 2 practice sessions again, but they only want to add it when they have more useful content, like maybe, for example, testing different parts and different objectives, something a bit more expanded. But I kind of disagree with that. It sort of breaks the immersion when you have to restart practice every time you change your setup, especially when you've got limited tyres to use. So, a bit annoying, but you know, sure we'll get over it for now. Helmet customization not confirmed as yet. Haven't really heard anything about that. I would like to have a nice customized helmet, and again, if I'm getting the PC version, then I might be able to customize it anyway, so that's not a big deal. It's more of a big deal on the consoles, but even if I can't customize it, I'll have my traditional blue helmet anyway. I expect that will be in the game. Another interesting feature is the ability to save during a race, which is pretty good for people like me who are a bit short on time sometimes. It means you can save during a race and then come back to it later, which might entice some people who don't usually do the longer races to actually have a go at it, see how they do. It should be interesting, see how that one plays out. Tyre scaling is back due to popular demand, which is good to see. Because in 2012, as most of you know, there was no real tyre scaling, and you basically did a one-stopper in like 25%, 50% races, rather than the 2, 3, 4 stops they do in real life. So expect to have a bit more strategy going into it with the tyres. With the tyre scaling, the tyres will go off quicker in shorter races. So that's good to see. Not that it affects me that much, because I'm usually on 25% race distances, but I am considering having to go at 100%. So that's we'll see how that one goes. Yeah, with the classic content, I think the main reason that there's not very much before the 1980s in terms of cars and drivers and that is because of how difficult it is to get hold of licenses and people that, you know, are still around who hold the rights to the certain cars and sponsors and all that. And let's not also forget that Formula 1 management as an organisation came in around was it 1982? What I've got here, yeah. So it is so we are unlikely to see any classic content before 82, mainly for that reason. There may be more DLC in the future, but I would be surprised if there's anything before 1982. But there is still quite a lot to choose from. I suppose if you want anything before 1982, then you're going to have to go to a game that doesn't rely on sticking to its licenses. Grand Prix Legends was a good example of a classic Grand Prix game. 1967 season, I think that was. That was an interesting little game. I never played it, but I did watch a few videos on it. Also on the subject of Ayrton Senna, or Ayrton Senna. I don't know why I keep pronouncing his name weirdly sometimes. As far as I know, he's not in the game. He's not going to be announced as a driver, a playable driver. Although this may disappoint some people. There is a lot of difficulty in trying to get his name. They may have done it with the movie, but his name probably costs like a bazillion dollars or something stupid, and it's probably not worth it. And it's a lot easier to get hold of someone who is still alive as well, unfortunately. And also, you won't be able to drive his McLaren either, or his teammates' McLaren, because, well, that's as far as I know at the moment, because McLaren's licenses are owned by a different company, so they're unlikely to see him in F1 2013. Now the trouble is, when another game company owns the licenses, it's extremely difficult to get hold of them, as you might imagine. So in that way it's disappointing, but it's not really Codemasters' fault. I mean, I'm quite happy that Codemasters did manage to go out and get these licenses for the ones they've got. So I'm quite glad they've had a go, at least getting some classic content in. It is a bit of a dodgy deal, really, because you've got those other games out there who may offer more simulation, who may offer better racing experiences because they have all the cars, but they're unlicensed and they're probably not quite the same as they should be. That's sort of the double-edged sword in being the official Formula 1 game, where you have to religiously stick to the licenses, especially with the damage model as well. You can't do too much with that, which is unfortunate. So their hands are a little bit tied, so you can't blame Codemasters for everything in that department, but they are trying, and it's good to see that they are bringing some classic content in. A lot of people have been asking for it for a while, I know, I've seen the forums. And as long as it doesn't detract from the main game, in the quality of the main game, then I'm all for it. I mean, I wouldn't mind driving an old car from the 80s or 90s. I want to get my hands on Damon Hill's Williams, because that was a season I always remember. 96 was a good year, and it should be interesting if we can get our hands on that. It's great being able to have our hands on Nigel Mansell's Williams. That's another great thing as well. I mean, being a Brit, it's always a good. It's always a good dream of being able to drive those sort of cars, even if it's not in real life. But yeah, can't wait to hear what else is announced for the classics. But let's not forget the main 2013 game, the staple of the series. I expect Champions Mode has been dropped because, mainly Champions Mode was mainly in 2012 because there were 6 champions on the grid. Schumacher has now retired, so there's not much point in keeping that. I think it was a one-off sort of thing, and I believe they have got a scenario mode now. Puts you in different situations. So, it'll be interesting to hear some more news on that one.
I think this might be our finishing position today, so don't take any risks. Bring the car home.
Just going back to the game for a second there. When he said that, thinking it might be our finishing position, I'd never actually heard him say that before, because I've never been in a position where I've been 15 seconds ahead of the car behind, so that actually kind of put me off a little bit. It's like, I've never heard it before. What else about the 2013 game that I can think off the top of my head? Apparently, from what I've heard, guys like Alex Zaffro say in his videos, is that the handling is quite improved. The physics are improved as far as he can tell. I don't know if he knows much about the AI, but apparently it's more aggressive and should be a bit more of a challenge, hopefully. So I can't wait to see that. Also, there is another difficulty level added, which is okay, but I would have preferred a system like Race 07's where you do it on a percentage scale, so you basically have 100 different options. But yeah, an extra difficulty level should be welcomed by the community, as long as the gaps between the levels are manageable. They're not too bad. Like if you're too fast for professional and too slow for legend, hopefully that should sort it out, or at least address that issue. Just trying to think if I can think of anything else before this video ends. What have we got written down? Nothing much. Nothing much else. I've gone through all my notes, that's for sure. Basically, the release date should be around the same time as last year. That's what they're planning. If that's the case, then I would predict that the game would be out by the 20th of September, probably the 17th for the US, seeing as they get it on the Tuesday for some reason. Don't ask me why, but I would assume that's the sort of time or date we're looking at for a release, and it's going to be released on the PC, the Xbox 360 and PS3. It will not be on the next gen machines, which is, I think, a decent business decision, because then you don't have to produce the game for the next generation consoles, because you risk low uptake, and you know, most people are going to be hanging on to their previous generation consoles for a little while longer, especially with the cost of a new console and the fact that there's not going to be much of a difference between the late games on this generation and the new games on the next generation. There's not going to be much of a graphics jump, there's not going to be much of a gameplay jump. It's going to take a little while for the new generation to get settled in, and I think by the time F1 2014 comes out, the next generation should be grounded and settled, and as I come through to say the win, should be grounded and settled, and that's a good time for the first F1 of the new generation to come out. So I think that's a decent business decision. Some people may be disappointed by that, but to be honest, it's not that bad. But yeah, that's all I know about the F1 2013 game. Let's have a look at these results. I haven't said a word about the race at all. As you can see, I pulled out a blinding race out of nowhere. 15 seconds ahead. I mean, what the hell? That's not something that happens to me. Look at my fastest lap, 150.6. The closest one I can see there's a 151.8 from Kimi Räikkönen. But as I said, the car felt fantastic today, and it's fast, and basically I was doing a Jenson from last year, except with Grosjean actually finishing the race and not crashing into everyone. Unfortunately, Jenson finished outside the points as well, so that's disappointing to see. But of course, I am still leading the Drivers' Championship. 66 points now, the gap to Nico Rosberg. So that's pretty substantial gap. I'm pretty comfortable at the top there. I would just like Jenson to do some more points hauling. Constructors is my main focus for this year, but there's not a lot I can do about it. I just have to hope and pray Jenson moves up the order if he qualifies badly, which he actually didn't in this race, which is a bit of a shame. But in the Constructors' Championship, it is still pretty tight. Vodafone, McLaren, Mercedes and the Lotus F1 team tied on the same points in second place, only 4 points behind Mercedes. Man, it's gonna be quite a constructors' dash for the line if it continues like this for the rest of the season. Did kind of mess up my words there, but never mind. But anyway, let's celebrate this win, my 6th win of the season, I think so anyway. But anyway, join me next time for round 13 in Monza, Italy. See you then.